Welcome to Mid-Century Living, your weekly nostalgia podcast about the best of technology and culture from the mid-20th century.
Welcome back to Mid-Century Living, the show where we talk all about the best of the mid-20th century and how to add vintage vibes to your modern life. We're your hosts, Jackie
and Gonzalo. Thank you for joining us today. So we are going to be talking today about a really cool prefabricated suburban house that was supposed to become the, quote, house of the future. So this is the Lustron Home. But first, Jackie, how was your week?
My week was good. February's wrapping up, which means it's time to get excited about the Disney Bound Challenge month. So I think I talked about this last year because I look forward to it every year. Every March, the official Disney Bound Instagram account hosts like an official challenge where there's a different prompt every day of the month. And you can like hop in and out of the challenge as often as you want, just sharing like Disney Bound outfits. This year, however, for reasons that I don't quite understand, but seem to be coming from a place of love and caring, they've decided to condense it down. Instead of a different prompt for all 31 days, they're just doing 15 days. And then you're supposed to just kind of like go from there with make up your own prompts or just to make it easier. I guess the idea behind it is that it's supposed to be like a lower pressure because they don't want anyone to feel extra stressed trying to do. It would be incredibly stressful to come up with a new outfit for all 31 days. But then again, I do that in Halloween for fun on my own. But but because the challenge, so normally they do 31 prompts and I just pick my favorites. But since they've narrowed it down to 15 this year, I'm trying really hard to do all of them. So I'm already in like planning stages, trying my best to just pick from stuff I already have. But I am going to have to make two things. So we're recording this 2 weeks before the challenge happens, and hopefully I will have two new pieces sewn before then so that I have the outfits ready. So fingers crossed. By the time this episode comes out, I'll either have done it or not. So this is exciting.
So you guys listening out there, did you do it?
We'll find out. Yeah. So if I did it, you'll see it on Instagram tomorrow.
And if you didn't do it, then everyone, you'll hear about it in a few more weeks when we re-record.
But anyway, so that's what's going on with me right now as I'm planning that out. What's going on with you?
Really nothing. We have entered the home stretch. I feel like, because once we finish this grading cycle that we were in, like we only have 2 more grading cycles before the end of the school year. So it feels like the school year is going to end soon, which is kind of nice. Oh, and also, hello, second period. 'Cause I know that you guys have heard about my podcast. So, hey, did you study for your test?
Hey, second period. Sorry you didn't think my graduated cylinder joke was funny.
I thought it was hilarious. I couldn't even tell it without... I can't even think about it because I laugh about it. Everyone out there, Jackie, when we were in high school, made a joke about a graduated cylinder during chemistry class one day. Hi, Mrs. Griffin. And it was hilarious, and it wasn't at all, but it was.
No, it was not funny.
But anyway, no, my week was good. If anything, researching for this podcast made me want to play video games. Because it's actually really cool, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. But the Lustron Home and one of my favorite video games, Fallout 4, have a lot to do in common. But anyway, long story short, which I get too late now, I don't have anything interesting, and I'm just filling up space with nonsensical rambling.
Well, in that case, let's just get on with the show then.
Sounds good. Let's get on with the show. Before we get started, though, we need to acknowledge where this episode came from, because it was actually inspired by an Instagram reel from @Meadows Home Inspections. So Alex Murphy, the content creator from this page, isn't strictly mid-century or mid-century at all, but he has a reel from an inspection of a Lustron house or a Lustron home that I stumbled upon a while ago, and I saved into our Instagram, and so here we are. So maybe we'll have... Yay. I wonder if we can share that reel.
Yeah, we probably can.
Yeah.
Or at least to our stories.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to define this topic a little bit more. What was the Lustron Home, and what makes it special?
It's one of those things that we'll find out soon enough that should have been amazing and like the way of the feature, and didn't become that. It's really cool.
Neat. So I guess some extra details, more specific details about what it is. So it's prefabricated, meaning that it was not built in place, but instead was built in a factory and then shipped and assembled in place. Enameled steel house that was developed in the post-World War II era. It was a response to a shortage of homes due to GIs returning from war overseas, and it was produced for a short time only, 1947 to 1950, by the Lustron Corporation of Columbus, Ohio, and designed by Carl Strandland.
Yes.
Strandland.
Also, everything in mid-century seems to be pointing towards Columbus, Ohio, and I can't believe I've never been there, and now I really want to. And also, hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom. So, Carl Strandland was born on March 5th, 1899, and died on December 26, 1974. He was a Swedish-born American inventor. He came to the USA at age 4. He grew up in Illinois and studied engineering via correspondence.
Is that is that even possible?
I guess that's what is that like the equivalent of an online college?
I guess so. Just by correspondence sounds so like
I guess they
official.
just mail you your homework and your studies, and then you mail them back.
I guess so,
everything.
because like today, online learning, you have Zooms and like lectures. By correspondence assumes that you are grown up enough to like actually follow the plan and then, submit your stuff at a timely manner.
Yeah, that's interesting. You basically have to teach yourself everything.
Yeah. So it's very impressive.
Yeah, that's cool. As an adult, he worked for the Minneapolis Milne Tractor Company, eventually leading to holding over 150 farm-related patents, which include the creation of rubber tires for tractors. During World War II, he invented manufacturing techniques for metal plates for tanks and also created air conditioning systems for movie theaters. By 1943, he had become vice president of the Chicago Vitreous Enamel Product Company, which is important because the Lustron House was enamel. And this company would eventually be the parent company of Strandland's Lustron Corporation.
Yes. So Carl Strandland had come up with a solution to a problem, and it's, you guessed it, a history thing. And the thing is that post-World War II America was facing a big issue, and that was housing. So over 4 million soldiers came back from the USA, to the USA after World War II. Post-war demobilization led to the army discharging an average of 1.2 million soldiers per month between September and December 1945, with even more being sent back home through April of 1946. And a lot of these soldiers came back in what the government called Operation Magic Carpet. So this was an operation by the U.S. War Shipping Administration, which was an emergency war agency of the U.S. government that was tasked with the purchase and operation of the civilian shipping tonnage the USA needed for the war effort, which is just fancy words for saying the transferring of troops between the USA and both the European and Pacific theaters of war. So the War Shipping Administration was tasked with repatriating millions of American troops, and hundreds of Liberty and Victory ships, including 370 U.S. Navy ships, were used for the repatriation of troops. Actually, one very well-known ship was used for transferring of troops, and that was the RMS Queen Mary. So check out our episode on ocean liners, because we talked about it a little bit. And funnily enough, a lot of the people that came back to the U.S. were actually thousands of European ladies who had married the U.S. troops that were serving there, and now as families came back to the USA.
And that explains extra why they all needed houses.
Yes. So this influx of people in the USA needed a place to live. And post-World War II, the USA faced that housing crisis I mentioned. So by 1946, Congress had declared housing a national emergency.
Wow.
Yes. And Lustron was the answer. Soldiers dreamed of the idyllic life, the American dream, right? A happy family, suburban home, the white picket fence, the whole 9 yards. And Lustron promised just that. Shipped, delivered, and ready to be assembled. So most pre-war houses were vertical multi-story buildings made out of wood and often designed to look like the colonial houses or variations of them that peppered residential life prior to the war. So a new design styles began to emerge, which we've talked about before. You may have heard of it. It's called mid-century modern. The new style called for one-story structures with fewer walls to accomplish what they wanted, known as an open floor plan. They also had new materials and methods that were coming up in the world: concrete, window walls, shallow pitch flat roofs, that kind of stuff. And the metal ranch style of the Lustron home exemplified this shift in residential architecture. The Lustron Home became the mid-century modern architecture for the mass market and were the first large-scale manufacturer of prefabricated homes in the USA. And a lot of the initial success of the Lustron Homes comes from the Reconstruction Financing Corporation. So this was a government-run department, I guess you say, that was tasked with funding the press sectors of the economy. The RFC had already kind of experimented with funding some prefab or prefabricated home ideas, but they were all weird, not really good for mass production, made out of concrete, and just looked funny. Carl had previously worked with porcelain enamel in gas stations and in restaurants, so he secured an RFC loan of 12.5 million, which is roughly 313 million in 2025.
So once they had secured the money, the Lustron Corporation had to get building. So by 1947, this new corporation was starting production and had a goal to produce 15,000 homes in their first year, and double that to 30,000 in 1948. The assembly plant in Columbus, Ohio was some 9 miles long and consumed more power than the rest of the city of Columbus. Located in the former Curtiss Wright factory, a company that merged the Curtiss Airplane and Motor Company with Wright Aeronautical and produced aircraft engines for the war effort. Today, this company still makes related components, but no more aircraft.
Womp womp.
The plant boasted approximately 8 miles of conveyor belts and 11 furnaces to cure the enamel panels. Presses for tubs and sinks, which could produce a bathtub in one draw, making its capacity about 1,000 tubs a day.
That is insane, but also what this was literally a press that you would put the metal in, and then the press would come down and create this shape of a bathtub.
And then it would just go off on a conveyor belt.
Yes.
I'm picturing like a...
But here's the thing.
Cool.
So this bathtub, once it was made, was half an inch bigger than the standard bathtub size of the mid-century. And that, believe it or not, was its downfall. Because, you can produce bathtubs for your home, but you can't produce them for anywhere else because they're half an inch too big to fit in the size that people were building bathrooms for. So, great, very expensive machine to make, to have, but you can only use it for Lustron homes. You can't sell the extras to put into whatever house.
Interesting. So they could make 1,000 tubs per day, but they had to make the exact same amount as they were making for houses.
Correct.
So steel was a ration material post-war and was actually controlled by the Department of Commerce, so only a small amount was allocated for non-essential use, such as building prefabricated houses. Lustron sold the houses via builder dealers located in most states. Panels were made out of porcelain enamel, which happens when you melt glass and fuse it to steel, creating a durable finish. The Lustron Corporation eventually was able to produce 2,498 Lustron homes during its short tenure, which was 1948 to 1950.
Yeah. So that falls a little short of their goal of 15,000 the first year and 30,000 the second year.
Yeah, a little short. But it had plenty of bathtubs if they only made 2,400 houses.
They had plenty of bathtubs that were half an inch too big.
So a little bit more about the construction of the Lustron house. After the concrete foundation was completed, factory-packaged Lustron flatbed trucks would arrive with the entire house. Everything except for flooring and electric and piping was included. The roof frames and trusses were delivered already welded, and it came with an erection manual, which was the book basically explaining how to assemble the house kit, which was 193 pages of instructions.
So imagine like an intense IKEA instruction book.
Jeez.
And there's really cool picture. I think we can link there's a PDF online of this erection manual, and one of the pictures in it is a picture of all the pieces that were delivered, and it looks like a drone shot, but it wasn't, obviously, because it's the 1940s. So it was probably like a crane or something, like a really tall ladder.
Were people expected to build these themselves, or
no? So the builder dealers that Lustron sold through, they were responsible for procuring the builder to do it. So basically, you as a customer would come in and be like, "Hey, I have this lot of land, or I want to build a house. Can you help me find a lot? I'll purchase the lot, and then you guys do the rest." So
cool.
But let's dive a little bit into what the Lustron home was. So Carl Strandland worked with architect Morris Beckman to create the Lustron home, and it was made out of something over 3,300 parts, and took about 350 hours, which is 2 weeks to be built, which is really fast if you think about it.
Yeah, that's really fast.
Yeah. The structure was made of steel frame, welded into walls and roof trusses. And the walls were porcelain finish, steel panels, compressed with plastic seal for airtight weather resistance. A semi-matte exterior came in the choice between surf blue, maize yellow, desert tan, and dove gray. And originally cost below $10,000, which is about $175,000 in 2025. Yes. And now the original price, which was, let's face it, 85 to 9,500, right? Which is under 10,000, but just barely. But anyway, that was actually about 25% less than the comparable conventional wood housing that was prevalent at the time. However, problems will arise soon because by 1949, the price of the Lustron Home will increase to 10,500, which is going to eliminate that benefit.
Right.
So the Lustron Home is built on a concrete slab foundation with no basement, although there are reports of some Lustron homes being built atop basements. So this is presumably something that had happened since or without Lustron's aid. But the interior of the home, it was designed with an eye towards modern age design, so space saving, ease of cleaning, all this post-war mid-century stuff. Right? Metal paneled interior walls were mostly gray, and all interior rooms and closets featured pocket doors to save space, but also kind of futuristic look. All models came with metal cabinetry and a service or storage area, and all had metal ceiling tiles as well. So it's like metal on metal on metal. You could put magnets everywhere.
Cool.
Yeah. The windows of a Lustron home typically came in two major types, both manufactured by the Reynolds Aluminum Company, which, yes, it is the same company that today you buy the aluminum foil from at the store. One type of window was called a tripartite, which is a central light flanked by four little small casement windows, which is the operable part. So one picture like one big center window pane with four squares on each side, stacked on each other. And then they also came with casement windows, which are operable hinged windows. You could, however, buy an upgrade for this Lustron home. So if you lived in the north, in the colder climates, you could purchase upgraded storm windows, or I guess storm shutters. The roof was porcelain enamel steel tiles, which were installed shingle style to make it look like traditional shingle. But the benefit here is that you don't have to replace the shingles like you do conventional. The front and rear doors both came with a single light of translucent rippled glass, and the floors were builder's choice, meaning that the builder could choose, well, not the builder, but the person who's buying it would let the builder put any flooring in it. However, one of the models that they offered, called the Westchester Deluxe, came with asphalt tile.
Interesting.
Yeah. All models were heated by an oil-burning furnace that directed hot air into an enclosed plenum space. So that is just the name of the space above the ceiling. Later models, though, like the Newport, would feature a forced air system, which is more like the traditional style of AC that we have today. The homeowner was responsible for supplying the kitchen range and refrigerator, but each house came with a Thor brand combination dishwasher clothes washer, which I looked so much. I found one video of them, but apparently like very few of these are still operable. But I want to know how you could have a machine that is both dishwasher and clothes washer. Hopefully you didn't do the both at once.
Yeah, maybe you just put a rack in it for the dishes.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Lustron did, however, offer a picture hanging kit for an extra fee. Basically, it was a kit to allow people to hang things on metal walls, which I'm hoping against hope. It was like pay $100 extra and then just give you like magnetic hooks.
Yeah.
You could, however, just screw into the space between the panels.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow.
All models came with a characteristic porch column that had an integrated serpentine downspout. And we'll have to put one of those pictures on the internet, on the Instagram, because they look really cool. They all also could be flipped to produce a mirror image of it. And all came available in 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom models. Not included, however, were fireplaces. And garages were they were designed for them, but not produced for them. And the reasoning behind this was that America needed steel for our housing. And that was the tagline that they had in their brochures. Like, we have these garages, we're just not going to send them to you because we need the steel for the housing. I mean, it's more important to have roofs over people's heads than
for those people that have garages.
Yes.
I guess that makes sense.
Yes.
There's also some fun advertising, like you kind of just mentioned. We can put a link to a brochure in the show notes. Man, I just love these vintage ads. They're all delightful illustrations, and this one's got a guy in a suit standing on top of a miniature house, welcoming you in to things you want to know about the Lustron home.
Yes.
It's adorable. So advertising magazines and brochures played big into the post-war feeling of needing to help America and marketed to newer or younger families. This is billed as the house America has been waiting for. And again, delightful drawings.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, they came in different models. They were originally going to offer 8 with varying amenities such as bedroom number and size, but really we have 3 that are known. The Esquire, which is a prototype, which is only one was built, and this was basically what they had as like a model house for people to go look at the very beginning, and this is what was included in advertisements that were sent out at the original offset of this. And this was just a small 2-bedroom house. Basically, you walk in, you have living space, and you have the kitchen, and you have the utility, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and that's it.
Only one bathtub.
Yes, only one. Yeah, so like that press, I could make 1,000 bathtubs a day. That was very ambitious because you only need one per house. We have also the Westchester Standard and the Westchester Deluxe, and these became like the most popular. If you look at a Lustron home that's standing today, more often than not, they are the Westchester Deluxe models. So the Westchester, both standard and deluxe, came in 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom designs, but the 2-bedroom became the most popular, and that one was just over 1,000 square feet. It came with separate living and dining rooms, which was a big change between the other models. No other model had separate. It was all like one open space. So the deluxe Westchester actually also came with master bedroom and living rooms that had built-in wall units, and also a living room bay window and built-in vanities in the bathrooms. But they're really cool. I mean, they're all little galley kitchens, so we're not talking about fancy schmancy houses here, but they're just really cool because they're all metal and they're modular, and they just feel so mid-century. You walk into a living room in the Westchester and you have like the open space with like the built-in vanity in front of you. If you go to the left, you have the dining room with a metal pass-through, and this was steel metal pass-through from the dining room to the kitchen, so you could like pass dishes through the cabinet into the galley kitchen, and a little utility room, and then 2 bedrooms with a bathroom in the hallway. And the interior of all these walls are also enamel, so they're very durable. Now the kitchen cabinetry and all the built-ins, those are steel. So sometimes what you see in today's life is you will see the wear and tear on the steel pieces, but not necessarily on the enamel walls.
Interesting.
Now, because the price started to go up, Lustron Homes came out with a smaller model called the Newport. Okay, so the Newport typically didn't have the porch that the Westchester had. It's a little bit smaller, and usually you can tell when this one is the house you're looking at because the gable of the roof is usually facing the streets instead of the Westchester, which had the gables facing the sides. And the gable is the vertical part of the roof. So like the triangle. If you look at a house,
right.
The little triangle the roof makes, that's called the gable.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. I figured, I saw your face. I was like, I need to explain this. There's also a model called the Meadowbrook. I just couldn't find much information on that one. Actually, a lot of the research for Lustron Homes ends in like not working websites. Oh. Like I would find amazing resources and I would like read about them and then like check out this place, and you would click on it and you would get that 404 error message.
Oh, that's a shame. But speaking of things that were short-lived, as we mentioned earlier, the Lustron Corporation only manufactured the Lustron homes for 2 to 3 years, between 1947, 1948, and 1950. So what happened to the house that was supposed to be the future of residential architecture and the house America was waiting for? So basically, mismanagement, politics, and corruption are blamed for the downfall. Clara Strundland, Carl's widow, mentioned in a September 12, 1982 Minneapolis Tribune article that Carl was physically and mentally destroyed by the closure of Lustron and said that everything we had went. They took everything but our home.
But it didn't say
It's
they lived in a
sad.
Lustron home, and I kind of hope they did. I really hope that they lived in a Lustron home.
Yeah, maybe. I would anyway, as just like free advertising for my company,
True.
probably.
And also probably like, employee discount.
Lustron originally received 20,000 orders, but they were only able to produce 2,680 before filing for bankruptcy in 1950. These highly engineered houses pose problems for the public. They were actually a hard sell for contractors, builders, and real estate dealers, and they had to navigate through tricky building codes.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the complications that went between ordering and building kind of gave a bad view of the company. The poor delivery schedule resulted in a reduction of their good reputation. And steel is heavy, so a Lustron home needed 12 tons, which meant trouble for shipping west of the Rockies. It was just way too expensive to get houses over there. And the steel also made it hard to modify.
Yeah. Once you got the Lustron home, that was it. You couldn't change the layout like you can by knocking over a conventional wall. And you couldn't add to it because unless they made a kit, and I would imagine that with time they would have probably made kits. It's just that they didn't have a chance to grow as a company. Mm-hmm. But they still sold. I mean, there's Lustron homes throughout the USA. There's actually even some in Texas. More on this later. But there's one not far from you.
Ooh.
Yeah. Anyway, the largest concentration of Lustron homes was in Quantico, Virginia, where 60 were installed at the Marine base there. And these were all Westchester Deluxe models. And they were there up until January 2006. In January 2006, the houses were deemed too small for the families on the base and were ordered to be given away for free. And why wasn't I an adult in 2006? Why was I in high school?
Oh, man, that's cool.
Yes. Now, there is a small caveat. They were given away for free so long as you could provide them with an $8,000 deposit, which...
Still cheaper than a mortgage.
Still cheaper than a mortgage, but also not free then.
Yeah.
So 58 houses were offered, but only one was picked up and moved, and it was moved to storage in Delaware.
No.
Yes. The rest were demolished, except for 2 that are in historic designation and are used as maintenance buildings.
Yeah.
Like the fact that these were there and no one claimed them, I'm like, what are you doing, people? What was wrong in the 2006? We were going, I guess the economy didn't really crash until 2008.
Well, I feel like small houses were really out of fashion in that time. Like, people are building these, like, huge, big, like, I don't know, even for small families, everyone still wants, like, bigger houses, like, more bedrooms than they need that they can grow into. And
yeah, that is true. And I will say, like, my biggest issue with the Lustron home is that there's only one bathroom.
Yeah.
But, like, in size, it's not that much smaller than my current house. Like, I feel like I could live in a Lustron home, and it would be amazing. Yeah. And then I could have a Barcelona chair, because I wouldn't be paying a mortgage.
Right, because it'd be free. Yeah, you can $8,000 for your house, $8,000 for your chair.
Exactly. Imagine getting the egg chair. No, was it the egg chair that was the $17,000 or $14,000 one?
Yeah, it was $15,000.
Yeah, like, what's more expensive, your house or your chair? If you have to ask that question,
a chair that's more expensive than your. These houses being demolished in the early mid-2000s really kind of brings us to our connection to today.
Yes. So as of 2004, 2,498 Lustron homes were still standing, with 50 placed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Nice.
Today, the Lustron home is significant not just as an American housing experiment, but as a demonstration of the post-war building effort and ingenuity. They are very significant historical artifacts and are valued also for pioneering prefabricated housing, though they weren't the first company to make prefab houses, but they are the first true attempts at housing mass production. But they are quietly disappearing. The surviving homes illustrate a fundamental problem with a non-standard prefabricated construction. Basically, like we mentioned earlier, they're very difficult to remodel or repair. All components are custom, so when things like gutters, roof tiles, or tracks for the sliding pocket doors wear out, it's impossible to get replacement parts. Builders aren't familiar with the homes, making it harder and more expensive to get someone to work on them as well. Actually, I was watching a video, which we will also link, and the lady that was showing the house, her house, said that once they started treating their house more like a car than a house, then they started noticing how much better it was to keep maintained. Because it's more like components, like the finish and everything. It's more like a car than it is a traditional home.
Interesting.
Painting is nearly impossible, which was its original benefit, right? It's thanks to the enamel surface, you can't really paint it, but also that enamel surface is what's giving the home its longevity. The biggest complaint from owners at the time, at the mid-century, was that you couldn't hang pictures with nails. But like I mentioned earlier, Lustron did provide an added picture hanging kit as advertised, and also you could just screw into the gap between the panels. Oh, if you happen to find yourself in one of these homes today, they were originally advertised as needing very little maintenance. So things like they were meant to be free of pests and materials that wouldn't fade, crack, or peel. So things like sunlight, chemical fuels, smoke would not fade or stain the finish. You only needed soap and water to keep it clean. And today, after 75 years, all these claims have definitely been validated, as many of the original homes not only still stand, but also have their original components. So the walls are the same, the cabinets are the same, the roofs are all still there. I mean, a 75-year roof, that's insane. There are some in Arlington, Virginia. One in particular, a surf blue, one that has been modified, sold in 2009 for $285,000. So very nice profit. There's one in Virginia that was sold last in 1973, and that's dove gray, and that was $40,000, but still pretty good chunk of change. And there's one in Dallas, in Texas, and that one is a 2-bedroom Meadowbrook model in Mace Yellow. The roughly 2,000 homes are spread among 36 states, but most have been modified. So there's a lot of additions that have been put on, trying to make it look like the enamel. People have remodeled their kitchens, have changed the windows for vinyl windows. Some have had roofs replaced, and a lot have been dismantled and then reassembled somewhere else. Preservationists urge owners to maintain them as close to original as possible, or bring them back to original if they've been modified. The Ohio History Center Museum in Columbus has an exhibit titled The 1950s, Building the American Dream. And it includes a restored 1949 Westchester Deluxe 2-bedroom model that has been furnished as it may have been in the 1950s. And this makes it the second museum in Columbus, Ohio that I want to go visit, because there's one with airplanes in it. And I can't believe I've never been to Columbus. But I think I need to go.
Add it to the list.
Yes, I know. We really should keep a list of museums. Many preservation societies exist and try to not only bring awareness to these homes, but also catalog existing homes to see what is still original and what has been modified. There's actually websites that actually have, like, these are the homes that we have that still exist. This is the address. This is when it was built. This is the model. This is the changes that have happened, or it's original, or here's where it was, now it's demolished, doesn't exist anymore. Like, it's actually kind of crazy how people have cataloged these. There's actually also a street in Albany, New York, that is known as the Lustron Houses of Germain Street Historic District. And this is recognized as a historic district and part of the National Register of Historic Places since 2009. And these are 5 houses that are Lustron homes. They're numbered 1, 3, 5, 7, and 8. And all are distinct Westchester Deluxe models, and all but one are original without modifications.
Cool.
Yeah. And lastly, like I teased at the beginning of the episode, if anyone out there listening on podcast land has ever played the video game Fallout 4 or watched the new Amazon series Fallout, which if you haven't, I recommend, many of the houses in this game are based on the Lustron home. If you're playing the video game, in the survivor, which is the main character's name, his house in pre-war era is in this place called Sanctuary Hills, and it is based on a Lustron home. Interestingly enough, the primary architect, Morris Beckman, was a 1938 graduate of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which in Fallout 4 we know as the Institute. Fallout 4, for all those who are not video gamers, it is a video game that is set in a post-nuclear war future in the year 2077. And it is the aesthetics are very much 1950s, but also futuristic. So it's like everyone is 1950s, and if you watch the series, like the clothes are 1950s, but it's set in the future, as if like we got to like the 1950s mid-century aesthetic and just stopped. And that's like, this works great. We're gonna keep it forever.
Man,
It's actually really cool.
can you imagine that? We should have just stopped. We're like, nope, design has peaked here.
Yes.
No way we can get better than that.
Yes, and it's actually very interesting why this aesthetic was picked, because in Fallout, the creators have said that they only chose 1950s style because no one else in gaming was doing it at the time.
That's also a great reason to make an aesthetic
Yeah.
decision. That's really cool.
Yeah. I highly recommend it, and I really want to go play it right now. There's also like a whole world of miniature gaming. So Black Site Studios is a company that supplies customers with wargaming miniatures, and they sell a miniature of Lustron House for $46.99, and it's meant to be a post-apocalyptic like the core, so like the house is all breaking down and stuff. It's very Fallout 4.
Interesting.
Yes. But now that we've caught up with the present by talking about a possible post-apocalyptic future in a video game, it's time for our etiquette segment. So Jackie, what do we have today?
So I'm really glad you picked a house, because it gave me an excuse to continue on with that chapter from Amy Vanderbilt, all about guests. So I guess I just like picking to a theme, but really I forgot how much I loved this etiquette book, and I just can't put it down now, obviously. So I'm just kind of stuck in this chapter of guest etiquette. So if you're a regular listener of the podcast, you'll know that in my last couple episodes, I covered like etiquette as a host, welcoming people to your home. And I covered etiquette as a guest, being invited to somebody's home. At the end of that chapter, Amy has a whole section on problem guests and how to deal with like common problem guests. Here's part 1, because these chapters are actually pretty long, of common problem guests and how to deal with them. Problem guest number 1 is the self-invited guest. Other than at tea time, which is traditionally open house, the hostess has no definite obligation toward a self-invited guest, so she means basically people who just show up unannounced. You may invite them to stay for a meal, but you can also tell them not to if it's inconvenient. If he or she shows no sign of going, you say something like, I hope you'll excuse us, our dinner is ready and we're busy this evening, or I'd ask you to join us, but perhaps some other time. I'm guessing this is the kind of person who just shows up at dinner and expects to be invited in. Apparently that was very common in 1963.
I feel like that's not happening in 2025.
No. Then there's another kind of problem guest, which is someone who takes strangers to their friends' homes. So another deplorable habit is that of taking your own guest, or more often several guests, to a neighbor's home in the evening or at cocktail time without so much as an advance warning. Under such circumstances, the host or hostess can take aside the ringleader and say something like this. It was nice of you to bring the Snodgrasses over, but Joe, or Mary, has had a hard day today, and there are a couple things we want to go over before I get him or her to bed. I know you'll understand, and do let us know the next time the Snodgrasses visit you again, and perhaps we can plan a little something. The key here is to basically, you need to start training your friends to call you before showing up at your house, even if they show up by themselves or with friends. And also, though, keep in mind that given advance notice, you're still not required to receive anyone in your home that you do not wish to see. I guess a lot of these are a little bit more dated because it's back in a time where you are obligated to be nicer than I think we are these days. Though I don't know, if someone showed up at my house, I would have a really hard time just saying, like, leave. But...
Yeah.
Another problem guest is someone who invites a guest to another person's party. So, first of all, practically no excuse for breaking an engagement for a formal dinner party, even if you have a sudden arrival of your favorite relative, for example. Because even just one extra guest, especially one with nothing in common with the other guests, can put a drag on the best planned party. So if you have a dinner party obligation and then you have a surprise guest show up, you should plan to go to that dinner party by yourself, even if your sudden guest has to spend the evening at your home alone. If he has any upbringing at all, he knows about the sacredness of such an engagement, which is usually arranged a good 2 weeks in advance. It is, however, less heinous to have your house guest included in a cocktail party or a buffet meal or some sort of informal dinner, unless you've observed your hostess's home to be small and ill-staffed or if she's running it by herself.
It's very judgy.
Well, I guess the idea is that if she has a staff arranging a buffet, bringing one more person isn't going to ruin things as much as bringing somebody unannounced to a dinner party that was planned for 2 weeks. And this hostess already spent like 2 weeks struggling over the menu,
Yeah.
finding a perfect person for everyone at the table, making sure it's all curated and everyone has something to talk about. And then you're like, surprise, my Aunt Mildred's here and I'm bringing her to the dinner party.
Surprise, surprise.
And I decided to just split these up, obviously, into just like people showing up places with people or people showing up places but unannounced. So the last kind of guest like this would be the guest with the dragnet, she calls it, which is basically someone with a wide net who knows a lot of people in a lot of places, I guess. So she says, we're all acquainted with the guest who no sooner arrives than he's on the telephone making contact with all his friends in the area. This is actually permissible if the guest is in from out of town. But he may not invite other friends to call upon him at his host's home. He may tactfully mention that he knows someone in the vicinity, and if the hostess makes the suggestion herself that the friends be invited over for some time during his stay, she may invite his friends herself by phone. The guest may speak to them first and then introduce the hostess, who then picks up the phone and extends the invitation.
Huh.
An out-of-town guest may ask to be excused to visit with someone in the neighborhood, but he should not involve his hosts in it, nor ask for transportation. The thing to avoid is any suggestion that what his hosts have to offer in the way of entertainment is meager compared to what he could have at any number of nearby friends.
Interesting.
I think that one's the most relatable. But anyway, there's part one of problem guests. What do you think?
I think that last one's relatable, but also like, I don't know. Yeah, if someone shows up uninvited and says like, "Hey, I'm here to stay for the weekend," already starting off wrong. But also, if that person does that and then it's like, "Hey, I'm here to stay for the weekend. Also, I talked to Judy and she's coming over." Like, no.
Right.
Like, first of all, I was planning a weekend of me sitting at home in my underwear, not doing anything, and now I've got to put on pants. And now you're also bringing someone else.
Yeah. Luckily, I think we've evolved beyond this in society, and I don't think people just show up anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this is sort of irrelevant, but some of it can apply to real life. Like, if you are going to a party that you already agreed to, and then suddenly when you have some other friend in town, like, I probably would ask if I could bring that person, but now I understand that that's rude, so now I'm not even going to bother, you know? Be like, thanks for the surprise, but I have prior plans that I am obligated to, and glad you showed up unannounced, but you're going to have to hang out at my house while I go to this thing.
I do like that first rule, and I do things like, yeah, thanks for coming. Awesome. Let's catch up later. Here's some takeout menus. I have a dinner to go to.
Right. Like, it's not your fault that they, like, that you have plans and they just decided to surprise you.
And I do like the idea that it's safeguarding the host or hostess from losing one person of their dinner party, especially if it's a dinner party where like they've curated the guests.
Yeah, I agree. These are all super cool ideas. Yeah, I didn't even realize. I was just like, oh, yes, of course, while I was like reading this chapter, and then reading it out loud, I realized like how dated and silly it is, because most people don't do that. But, you know.
Yeah.
It's good to be prepared for all situations.
Yeah.
Anyway, it sounds like we both kind of approve of all of these etiquette tips.
Yes.
Well, I think we're definitely in agreement that showing up unannounced or inviting people to parties that they weren't invited to is super rude in the 60s and today.
Correct. Yes.
But I do appreciate having a couple tips and, I guess, sort of permission to tell those people to get out of my house.
Yes, this is how you politely say "get out." You give them your copy of Amy Vanderbilt's Book of Etiquette and say, "Here, read this chapter, please," and then you stand there with your arms crossed while they read. But it looks like with that, we have built the Lustron Home. So thank you all for listening today. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show and tell a friend.
You can also follow us on YouTube and Instagram at MCL Podcast. Instagram is actually the best place to send us feedback and episode suggestions, so send us a DM anytime. You can also contact us through the Send Us a Text Message feature in our show notes.
Yes, so send us some fan mail. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye!
Thank you for listening to Mid-Century Living. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. See you next Friday.